Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ dhammāṃ saṅghāṃ namasāmi. So the resident community here is a little bit over halfway through winter retreat. About half of us have already had solitary retreat time, and the other half are just beginning. This winter retreat time is an opportunity to focus on meditation in detail and in depth. And I thought I would just talk about sort of some miscellaneous stuff about meditation. Some of this, the details of meditation are different for each person. And so some of this will not all of this will be relevant to you, I can guarantee that. Hopefully, perhaps bits of it will. Also over the past 3 years or so, I've been working on a project that indexes Ajahn Kaccana's questions and answers. And so I've listened to over 2,000 questions and answers by Lumpur Pasano. Many of these are on long meditation retreats, either with lay people or with monastics. And so certainly some of what I say is informed by all of his questions and answers. One of Ajahn Kaccana's most common themes is that of right effort. Whenever anyone asks him, is my practice going in the right direction? Should I do this or that? He responds with, well, when you do something, do wholesome states increase and unwholesome states decrease? If so, keep doing it. If not, try something else. And so that is, in some ways, that's the most basic instruction for both meditation and bhavana, which, although sometimes meditation is one translation of that, but it's broader, development, cultivation. It's bhavana is the aspect of the Buddhist path which deals with developing the mind. And it's very, very broad. But all of it comes down to that principle of right effort, and then right mindfulness and right samadhi are both subsumed under that. And again, what's right about them is that they are a cause for wholesome states to increase and unwholesome states to decrease. And if that's not happening, even if you could call it mindfulness or you could call it concentration, it's not right. Another principle with the practice of meditation is that, as broadly divided into practices of Samatha and Vipassana, and Samatha, it refers to settling or calming meditation, basically working through working through the hindrances enough so that the mind becomes peaceful and clear. And then Vipassana is the investigation, using whatever clarity of mind that we have in order to see things clearly. Because again and again our teachers remind us that pleasant states in meditation are wholesome and are pleasant and often wholesome, but they're always impermanent and never reliable. And you will stay stuck in clinging and craving if that is the only thing you do in your meditation, is make your mind peaceful without investigating what's going on. However, the usual approach to these is you do Samatha practices first and then Vipassana second. But there's a dialogue. I think Ananda is speaking, and he says, I forget who he's speaking to, but he says when people come to the Buddha and declare final knowledge, which means awakening, they all have done so in one of four ways. And one of these ways is Samatha preceded by Vipassana. The second way is Vipassana preceded by Samatha. The third way is Samatha and Vipassana equal and together. And the fourth way is something that nobody really understands. So I'll leave that alone. But the first three are instructive in that instead of clinging to an idea that, well, I've got to settle my mind before I start investigating. If your mind isn't settled, oftentimes some investigation can help to settle it. And certainly if you're the more years of school and the more thinking you've done, I would guess the more likely it is that you're going to need to use some investigation in order to settle the mind. If you've been a farmer most of your life, or just had very, simple tasks, farmer, hunter, fisher, these sorts of things, then it's more likely that your mind will just be naturally settled. You'll be able to settle it without having to investigate. I think most of us fall in the former category overall. So, but again, find out what works for you. One of the other things that Ajahn Kaccana says repeatedly in his teachings is that although you begin investigation with perhaps using thought, the best, the most useful, the deepest investigation does not use thought. And he doesn't usually explain that, and I've been puzzled, it's been a perennial puzzle for me what he means by it. I must have heard that. I must have heard that first, at least 15 years ago. And I think I will get back to that later in the talk in terms of my hunches as to what that might mean based on experience. But in terms of how investigation works, it's almost always framed in terms of the characteristics of existence, impermanence, dukkha, anicca, which is usually translated impermanence, although uncertainty, unreliability are also changefulness. Those are also, it's a whole cluster of meanings. Dukkha, which is usually translated simply as suffering, ranges everywhere from sort of mildly, very, very mildly, unsatisfactory, all the way up to just straight agony. So, especially in terms of meditation, the subtler forms of dukkha are sometimes more relevant. So unsatisfactoriness is a good translation of dukkha for meditation practice. And then anatta, not self. The sense, there's a lot that could be said there, but it's both subjective. There's this experience, but you can't, if you try to find, which bit of this experience is me, you'll find that you can't. There's no bit of this experience that you can say, this is me, and it will actually not cause you problems. Similarly, but it also functions with the external world. Things are not what we label them to be. The world is not what we think it is. What we think it is some kind of model of the world, which is of greater or lesser functionality, but it's still approximate and it's still wrong in an absolute sense, and so unreliable and unsatisfactory. So both inside and out. But when I first heard teachings like this, what I attempted to do was, I would settle the mind down, and then I would think, well, maybe my mind is settled enough. Maybe I'll try to investigate. And then I'd try to come up with something to investigate. And sometimes it'd be helpful, and sometimes it wouldn't. But it was like I would introduce something new into the experience, an idea about, sort of, So you could take the 5 khandhas, and then, you're settled nicely on the breath, and then you start thinking about, the aspects of the body that are impermanent. And that's not wrong. It's not, if that's increasing wholesome states for you, go for it. It's, however, in my experience, adding stuff tends to, giving the mind more to chew on, and so oftentimes it doesn't seem to work, and the times when it does, what I find is that if I then try to do it again, it often doesn't work a second or third time. And so it's not like I can't come up with a sort of list of, okay, this is a reliable topic of investigation. If I put the mind in this direction, it'll usually be beneficial. So instead, what I've been exploring over the last few years is working with anicca, dukkha, and anatta with the experience that's already present instead of adding to it. And there's some ways of, I've found ways that I don't know that people have told me these things. It's just what I've after some trial and error, things that I found helpful. One thing is that when investigating impermanence, I've found it more helpful to, instead of, you can pick up some experience in the present moment. This thought is, this experience. If your knee is hurting, the knee, you can recognize, knee hurting is impermanent, which is absolutely true and maybe useful. But one thing that I've found helpful that people didn't tell me was comparing the relative reliability of different aspects of one's experience can be a helpful way to contemplate anicca. And so this is, if you have two things going on in your experience, you can investigate which of these is more reliable. And this is actually this can be a very useful way to settle the mind, because, so for instance, you're experiencing the breath, and then a thought about what you want, what will happen tomorrow comes up, and you can ask yourself, which of these is more reliable? This experience of breathing in and out, or what I'm going to do tomorrow. And you recognize, what I'm going to do tomorrow, those thoughts have often been incorrect. But I know pretty clearly, I usually don't make a mistake when I'm breathing. It's not like I accidentally think I'm breathing out when I'm actually breathing in. That's pretty reliable knowledge. And whereas knowledge of the future is not. And that can be really helpful. That's contemplating impermanence right there, unreliability. And it also gives you it develops disenchantment with those thoughts about the future, or thoughts about who I am or who other people are. Again, just compare it to, do I know this with the same kind of certainty that I know whether I'm breathing in or breathing out? And the answer is, actually, thoughts are way less certain than that direct knowledge. And again, if you're using a different meditation object, you can compare it to that. But that's a useful way of settling the mind, and it cultivates Samatha and Vipassana right together, and it can be. Or you can also contemplate whether this thing right now, whether what I'm experiencing right now actually lives up to its promises. And that's a example of contemplating unsatisfactoriness. Sometimes one can notice sort of trends and patterns in one's meditation, and there's particular things that really, really grab the mind. So, for instance, as soon as meditation seems to be going well, oftentimes I will try to make it into something. I'll try to imagine that I've finally got it. This is the way, meditating like this will be finally the thing that will make meditation good all the time and will give me something I can depend on in the future. And I notice just very strong currents of fear regarding the concept of the future, and a deep pattern that, I began spiritual I began intensive spiritual practice at a young age, self-directed, because I was in order to try to be someone who would be safe in the future. And I didn't realize that, I hadn't heard anything about anatta, and I probably wouldn't have understood it if I had. So that's a deep pattern. And what you can do, or what I've found helpful, is that when the mind is settled enough, you can actually bring up that pattern. So, very simple, like in my case, it's just the concepts, me, safe, forever. And you can see it, the mind really lights up. Yeah, that's what I want. That's what I want. It's like, okay, and that's not bad. Of course we want that. Who doesn't want to be safe? Who doesn't worry about the future? Actually, there are some people who don't. They're either, enlightened or deluded. But, so, yeah. So anyway, but then in that particular one, if there are in that case, one can look and notice that, you just in this present moment experience, I can't find any me, I can't find any safe, and I can't find any forever. They just do not locate in present moment experience. And so what I'm wanting is basically a phantom. And I keep trying to find a present moment, I keep trying to have an experience that will mean something that it can't. But nevertheless, that's what's going on. And so, you could, anyway, so that's delusional, right? And the delusion that you see is much better than the delusion that you don't. And sometimes what will happen is it become disenchanted with concepts about me and about safety and about future or forever. Those, recognize those are simply concepts in the mind. And what we can do is you can think them, actually. You can think and then just feel what it feels like, in the sort of body-mind experience. Me. What's that like? What does that do? Me. And it's just it's kind of a blip. Maybe it's got some feelings to it, me. But it isn't me. Whatever those feelings are, whatever the experience is not me. There's an experience of this concept going through the mind. It's like this, but it's not me. Or safe. Do that. But there's some sort of experiences that go with that. Some present moment experiences that occur when one brings that concept into the mind, but none of them are safe. And ditto with forever or future. You can't place those either. They're abstractions. And yet I find that, I keep chasing after them. Imagining that, some kind of experience could actually make those abstractions true. When in reality, you can't make them anything. They're abstractions. And so then this dispelling the enchantment of these thought patterns can make it easier to settle the mind in the present moment experience. Because, when you stop chasing those, you recognize, well, there's this right here. What is this like? And it's a lot more the thisness, just the experience of the breathing, the weight in the body, even the tone of the mind it's here. It actually, the experience actually is present, and the knowingness experience is a significant refuge. But in order for the mind to really settle there, sometimes we have to sort of teach it that the places it can try to run away to aren't secure at all. Another thing that I find is that in terms of working with thoughts, if noticing the difference in the experience of body and mind when I'm thinking, and at the same time I'm able to know the beginning and end of the in-breath and out-breath, and when I'm just thinking and have no idea about what the breath is doing at all. And I find the former to be much more settled. The thoughts have a different tone when I can actually be aware of the in and out breathing while thinking. They don't move so fast. They don't run so far. They seem to be much more reliable. Tends to be less enchanted with concepts. Whereas if I don't know where the breath is, then the mind can run a really long way. So Ajahn Chah used the analogy of keeping the chicken in a coop. You have this wicker coop. You drop on your chicken, and your chicken can run around move around a little bit in the wicker coop, but you can just leave the chicken there because it can't get out. And that was his analogy for the thinking mind. And at least I've found mindfulness of breathing makes a relatively good chicken coop. Another aspect of long-term meditation practice that I've found is what you can ask the question, what lasts and what doesn't? You go on a meditation retreat like this for 3 months, and and some things change temporarily, and other things change in a more lasting way. What are those? What are the patterns? And at least what I've noticed is that my experience tends to be that the samadhi doesn't last. Maybe it does for some people. If it does, great. But my mind won't stay. It doesn't easily stay concentrated, or settled without, whether or not it's settled is largely a function of external circumstances. As the external circumstances change, the degree of settledness changes, and in particular, if I find a meditation technique that seems to work really well, invariably find that if I just keep doing it, it stops working. It won't concentrate the mind consistently anymore. And when I've thought about what that's like in terms of other aspects of experience, and recognize that that's a bit like sensory contact. When we experience something either pleasant or painful, or very painful things don't work like this, but moderate, somewhat painful things do. It can be pleasant, it's pleasant at the beginning, but then if it keeps going, it won't. It'll just get less and less interesting. And I remember when I was a young person, I had enough mindfulness of mind that when I listened to music, particular songs, I could see, I was paying attention to, how much enjoyment I got from those songs. And it was like, it peaked at about listening to them 2 or 3 times. And then after that, it dropped. And, I'd have to go find a new song. And the new song seemed to, made me sort of happier than the old song, but then it too, only 2 or 3 times, and then it had peaked. So then that's just what I noticed about. And that's just completely typical for sense contact. And that's why sense contact is unsatisfactory. And that right there is dukkha. You just can't get it. It doesn't work. And at least my experience is that meditation objects seem to fall into that category. Not sure that everyone has that experience, actually. You may be different. But but what shall we say? We have other aspects of human experience that really do change. So when I first started, 17 years ago, when I first started shaving my head, it took an hour and it ended up as a bloody mess. And now I can do it in 20 minutes, and I rarely cut myself. And what shall we say? This is not majorly surprising. This is the natural result of humans learning skills, and we all do this. We've all have experiences like this, but what's interesting is I haven't found meditation objects to work like that. It's not like I've gotten, it's not like I have gotten massively, measurably better in 17 years at being able to, I used to be able to only stay with my breath for 2 minutes, and now I can do a whole hour without ever moving, without mind on breath, whole hour. Nope, didn't work like that. And I don't even notice even sort of, it just doesn't seem to work like that. But again, your experience may vary, I don't know. What I have found, though, is that there are things, developing perceptions in meditation does work like building skills. So for instance, I remember in 2005, I was on retreat with Lumpur Sumedho at Spirit Rock Meditation Center, and he was teaching about the sound of silence, using that subtle ringing sensation in the ears as a meditation object. And not some people can hear that very easily. Some people it's too loud and they call it tinnitus and don't like it. Other people just can't hear it at all most of the time. And in 2005, I was like that. I remember I was walking in the walking hall thinking, gosh, people, he's talking about this sound of silence, and I can't even hear it, at least not most of the time. It's like, Or maybe I did hear it about 2 minutes ago for about 10 seconds. Anyway, it was a frustrating retreat. About 5-6 years later, as a monk at Abhayagiri, I spent a winter retreat, and I developed the sound of silence. And even though I don't use it as a meditation object almost at all, I find other mindfulness of breathing is more helpful for me. I can still hear it when, I still know how to hear it. Mostly whenever it's quiet enough and I think about it, I can do that. And so that parallels developing a skill. And I just know, so I find that an interesting contrast between, so what aspects of meditation practice work like sense contact, what aspects work like developing a skill. Again, investigate for yourself to see what's applicable in your case. So nothing else is particularly popping into my mind, so we can close the evening here, and I wish you all a very good, good 6 weeks remaining of the retreat. Sadhu, sadhu, anumodam.
And before we close the evening, we'll chant one of the reflections from the same dark brown book, page 33, the verses of sharing and aspiration in English, page 33. Let us chant the verses of sharing and aspiration through the goodness that arises from my practice. May my spiritual teachers and guides of great virtue, my mother, my father, and my relatives, the sun and the moon, and all virtuous leaders of the world, may the highest gods and evil forces, celestial beings, guardian spirits of the earth, and the Lord of death, may those who are friendly, indifferent, or hostile, may all beings receive the blessings of my life. May they soon attain the threefold bliss and realize the deathless through the goodness that arises from my practice, and through this act of sharing, may all cravings and attachments quickly cease, and all harmful states of mind until I realize Nibbana in every kind of birth. May I have an upright mind with mindfulness and wisdom, austerity and vigor. May the forces of delusion not take hold, nor weaken my resolve. The Buddha is my excellent refuge. Unsurpassed is the protection of the Dhamma. The solitary Buddha is my noble guide. The Sangha is my supreme support. Through the supreme power of all these, may darkness and delusion be dispelled.